Joining us now is former Kemper County Project Manager Brett Wingo. We thank you for joining us on At Issue.
Thank you.
Do you like being called a whistleblower?
I do not like the term. I did not start out blowing a whistle. I started out talking to my coworkers, to my direct managers about serious concerns regarding our financial reporting. That eventually escalated to me talking to the CEO, and eventually it led to me being run out of the company, quite frankly. And so now I am a whistleblower. It's something I'll have to accept, but no, I don't like the name.
How long did you work there at Kemper?
I worked on the Kemper project starting in 2007, actually. I hired with the company in August of 2007, and I was an engineer that helped design the plant. In 2011, I became project manager over the gasification island. That's the part of the plant that takes the lignite and turns it into syngas.
And did you think in those early stages that eventually this would work?
Absolutely. You know, I was part of a small team of engineers, roughly 10 to 12, core engineers that designed this plant. And these are top-notch guys. You're not going to find better engineers anywhere. And we worked hard, and we created a design that we believe will work. Now, the problem is not the technology. The problem is the economics. It will work. It's just going to cost, obviously, where we're at now, $6.8 billion and counting, and they're still not finished. So unless they're willing to commit to spending a couple $100 million more dollars, they'll never get a chance to prove it'll work.
Did you feel that you were under pressure to get it completed by a certain time?
Absolutely. Upper management let us know early and often that cost pressure was on us, schedule pressure was on us. Right out of the gates in May of 2010, we were told if we missed the May 1st, 2014 commercial operation date, and if you hear me say COD later in this interview, that's what that means, it's the finish date. We were told that if we missed the May 1st COD, May 1st, 2014, that we would immediately lose $133 million in federal tax credits. So yes, we were under tremendous pressure to get this project built, designed, procured, and built.
So the management team was under pressure for economic reasons, and that pressure was passed on to you to get it done for those reasons.
Absolutely, and that's the way organizations are.
At what point did you start raising concerns about the project?
Well, as a team, we all started raising serious concerns in 2012 because even the engineers on the project could see that the progress at the job site was did not look like we would hit our May 1st, 2014 finish date. But for me personally, my concerns became magnified because I became a project manager in late 2011. 2012 was my first year, full year, as a project manager responsible for the gasification island. And they really started to become critical in 2013 when I was given control of the actual schedule. The schedule of the startup and commissioning. That's the part of the project that happens after you build the plant. You start it up, you test it, you commission it. I was given control of that part of the schedule. Now that it was my responsibility, and I saw that reality wasn't matching with what we were stating publicly, that's when the crisis came for me.
Give us an example of something that wasn't on schedule when you went to the site and you realized that you're behind.
Well, right off the bat, the first thing people noticed was that a lot of the pipe that we were hanging, when you build a multiple story structure and you run pipe through it at different levels, you have to support it. You don't just lay it on the ground. It's usually over your head. So it has to be supported by something called a pipe hanger. We saw a pipe in the gasifier structure that was being held up by cables and ropes. I mean, it was not a good look. And when you talked to construction about what was going on, which you didn't have to talk to them, they were actively complaining. They said they weren't getting enough pipe or pipe hangers to build the plant. This was happening in 2012, so that was the first visible sign of something at the site. But probably the biggest thing for me personally that tipped me off, something is terribly wrong with our schedule. We were told that in the gasifier area, particularly in the gasifier structure where the gasifier is installed, this is the huge 200-foot tall, 10-foot wide vessel that gasifies the coal. It's the centerpiece of the new technology. We were told that in late 2011 that we had no time to lose on that, because every day we lost in that particular area of the plant, we would lose on the back end of our schedule. In other words, we would miss our May 1st, 2014 COD date. Well, in 2012, we had major refractory failure issues at our fabricator. Now, this is not a huge deal in terms of it's a problem you can fix, and we fixed it. The problem was it took a lot of time, and we lost somewhere between 3 and 6 months on the overall schedule, and yet even through 2012, when we had a 3 to 6 month delay on the gasifier, we did not report a slip in our May 1st, 2014 COD. That's when I was pretty certain that we had something terribly wrong with our scheduling.
It's something so complex such as this, so much so that a lot of people don't. It took me a while to get my arms around
Right.
what they're even trying to do at Kemper. How important is it to get it right than just to get it done?
It is paramount that they get it right. If you hear that they're announcing delays to make sure they're doing things safe or that things are done, that's what I say. When I say right, I say it in the context of safety. What everyone needs to understand about this particular plant, it's not like a regular coal-fired boiler power plant, a pulverized coal power plant. This is what that was supposed to replace. This is not like a natural gas combined cycle plant. This is like a petrochemical plant. This is more like something you would see along the Gulf Coast, down around Houston or Beaumont, Texas, or Lake Charles, Louisiana. These huge chemical plants with these giant flares and all these weird-looking vessels and columns. There are chemicals inside of those that are dangerous. They're poisonous, they're explosive, corrosive, and that's why it's important to get it right. And that means doing things safely.
And at this point that you're talking about, they weren't getting it right.
They were not getting it right. There were a lot of construction quality issues that we tried, and I say we, several of us engineers, in my case as a project manager, tried to bring this to the attention of other project managers. And you have to understand, I was a project manager on Kemper. There were other project managers, so there was at multiple levels. But ultimately, the executive pressure to keep up with announced schedules trumped any sort of quality control on the installation and inspection of our piping, and that's the major component that you have to maintain. And that's been corroborated, by the way. I read the Public Service Commission's reports from their independent monitors. They have vindicated that quality of pipe and pipe connections has been terrible.
So when you went to your supervisors with this concern about the quality of the work and the timeline that
Right.
you were trying to work within, what was your reaction?
The reaction was that I all of a sudden realized I was not on distribution lists for high-level emails. I was isolated as a project manager, and shortly after I noticed the severe drop-off in communication, high-level communications, I was asked to step down from my project management roles and focus more on my roles as one of the engineers that helped design the plant. They wanted me to basically go back to just being an individual contributor.
Why do you think they did that?
Because I was messing up the story. There's two different stories. There's the real story, and then there's the public story. The public story is that it's all going great. We're going to be online inside of 2014. It's going to be a great project for the people of Mississippi. What we could see internally was there was no way we were going to finish this project before the third or fourth quarter of 2016. A lot of that had to do with the fact that construction quality was terrible. One of the ways they were able to keep proclaiming earlier finish dates was construction would have something halfway complete with a lot of quality issues, which would normally prevent the commissioning group from taking it over and testing it. But that's not what happened on our project. Due to executive pressure, our commissioning group took these construction packages, which still had sometimes 50% of the construction still left, and a lot of the inspection documentation missing. But that was never added back to the schedule. It made it appear like we were finishing when in fact they were just kicking the can further down the road. We had a lot of construction work left. So when we were telling the world that we were going to finish in 2014, and this is back in 2014, I was telling management we're not going to finish until the third or fourth quarter of 2016, and I think time has vindicated that.
Well, the company says it continues to monitor your statements on this. They say they conducted an internal and external investigation of your concerns and determined that they were not supported by the facts. You disagree with that, obviously.
I vehemently disagree with that. I would characterize their internal investigation, which was performed by the compliance department. And a compliance department is required under the federal laws on publicly traded companies. It's there to investigate allegations of fraud, as I made internally. When I went to the compliance department, though, with this absurd proclamation by other project managers that we would finish by December 1st of 2014. This was back in February, March, and April of 2014. When I went to compliance with this concern after actually having gone to the CEO first, but that's a different story. But when I told them that it was absurd that the company could say with a straight face that with 80% confidence, and that's a statistically based analysis, this is an actual confidence, 80% confidence that we would be finished by December 1st of 2014. When I go to the company and say that's a fraud, that there's no way we're going to finish with this project until sometime in 2016, and then they say, no, those people were obviously right. None of those people were fired. I don't understand how you can have an actual true investigation and not see that I was correct. As far as the independent investigation that was performed by Jones Day Law Firm, and I know this because the company said so in correspondence with my attorney, but Jones Day was supposed to investigate those same allegations and declared nothing to see here. Mr. Wingo was obviously wrong. Well, here we are in the third and fourth quarter of 2016, just like I said we would be. It'll likely be well into 2017 before the plant's actually finished. And yet every single one of the managers that signed off on the December 1st of 2014 proclamation with 80% confidence, they're still on the project. So that's all I have to say about the veracity of their investigations.
The Kemper facility is currently producing electricity by using natural gas, and the company got approval from the Public Service Commission for a rate increase to cover that part of the plant. They've not yet requested another rate increase for the clean coal technology part of the plant to recover the billions of dollars in costs from customers. Do you think the costs incurred were prudent?
No, I do not. That's the short answer. Having been through what I've been through with the company and realizing the ethics of the people involved, it goes all the way back to the original decision to build this plant. I did not know this when I was a project manager. I discovered this later after the company finally fired me on February 15th of this year. After a year and a half on paid administrative leave, they finally mercifully let me loose. But I looked up some information and found a report by independent monitor, Burns and Rowe, who works for the Mississippi Public Utilities staff, who is kind of a, I don't want to call them a watchdog, but they watch over the Public Service Commission. Apparently this independent monitor had a long track record of documenting that we did not use basic project controls that are available everywhere else. They were seeing that from the outside. On the inside, they were doing this in 2014, by the way. I was seeing the same thing on the inside, so we both agreed that something is wrong here because they're not applying basic tools that anybody else would use in this situation, and they refused to use them, like my schedule. They refused to acknowledge that it wasn't going to be until 2016 that we were commercially operational. But I have to go back. When you see this much unethical behavior by key actors, and then there's no accountability, nobody is fired except for me, it makes you question everything all the way back. So in this same report from the independent monitor, I found a record of decision back from 2010 in which Tommy Anderson of Mississippi Power said with 98% confidence level that we could build this plant for $2.88 billion or less. And that is absolutely impossible to achieve. So to answer your question in a really long way, I don't think the economics for this plant were ever true. I don't think they were real. And if I was a Mississippi ratepayer, which I live in Alabama, but I really feel for the ratepayers of Mississippi. I feel for the entire state of Mississippi because I don't think this plant could have ever been built for less than $5 billion. And if you don't have natural gas prices above $11 per million BTUs, and if you didn't build the total plant for less than $3.1 billion, and if you didn't finish by May 1st of 2014, because once again, you incur $133 million in extra cost just for that one schedule slip, the odds of hitting that trifecta were so small that it was virtually impossible from the very beginning. And so, no, as a Mississippi ratepayer, I wouldn't want to pay 1 red cent above what they're currently paying for the combined cycle.
Do you now think the lignite coal part of that plant will ever work? Will it ever produce electricity?
The technology will work. I was part of the team that helped design it. We did a good job, I believe, designing the plant. We worked with KBR out of Houston, Texas to design the plant, and the engineers are top-notch, top of their class type engineers. So the technology will work. The problem is, will Southern Company and or Mississippi Power have the financial wherewithal to see it through? Because the company has stated over and over again that this is first of a kind. Well, that's not true. The construction of the plant was not first of a kind. It was just concrete, steel, pipe, wire. Nothing first of a kind about building that. We are just now entering the true first of a kind part of this project, and that's what's scary. Because now they're going to be testing the gasifiers, testing the gas cleanup systems, seeing if they can extract the CO2 and send it down the pipeline, seeing if their sulfuric acid plant will work, seeing if they can do ammonia recovery, and integrate all these systems with a brand new computer system that has never been implemented before. We are just now getting into the true first of a kind part of this project, and most of the engineers on my team believe that this would take a long time, on the order of 12 months. The company's saying that they can do it in 3. So,
will running that plant ultimately be cost efficient, you think?
As a natural gas combined cycle, as they've been running it for the last year, yes. Actually, it's been 2 years, hasn't it? Time flies.
So
yeah.
You see a future where they could shut down this quote unquote experimental part of it and just operate it as that?
I don't just suspect that future. I absolutely believe that they will have to shut down the coal gasification side after they've run it for a few years, because with natural gas prices staying historically low, with no projected increase in sight, and with the huge capital cost that you're talking about, they're asking Mississippi ratepayers to take on another $3 billion probably in capital costs to run this as some type of hybrid plant where you can run it on natural gas, or if you're not, or run it on lignite, but if that part of the plant's not running, then switch to natural gas. The cost for doing that is going to be astronomical. It's not just because of the $3 billion that you're adding to the rate base for the capital, plus the return on equity. The scary part, and people need to understand this, the same people that did the original cost projections for the capital cost and said we would be done with this project in 4 years, so the people that said with 98% confidence, we'll be finished with this project in 4 years, and it'll be under $3.1 billion total, and that's why this is the better idea. These same people are the ones that did the O&M projections. That's operations and maintenance. That's the plant staffing. That's the amount of money it costs you every year to maintain this equipment. Conservative projections on a chemical plant like this say somewhere in the neighborhood of 10% of your total capital cost is what you can expect to spend every year on O&M. Well, you're talking about a $6 billion plant. Now, even the Mississippi ratepayers only pick up $3 billion of it, you're still having to maintain a $6 billion asset. That's a lot of money. That's $600 million a year. That's how much you could have built a natural gas combined cycle to begin with.
But the new part of it, the newfangled part of it, that's the jewel in the crown of the whole thing. So you're suggesting that it will be likely that they don't even move forward with that?
I believe they will not move forward with it if the Public Service Commission denies it. If the Southern Company has to run it through a 1 or 2 year demonstration period before the PSC considers putting it into the rate base, they will prove themselves that it's too expensive to maintain. You've got 1 million linear feet of piping handling highly corrosive, abrasive liquids and fluids, refractory lined vessels, hundreds, thousands of heat exchangers, pumps, large centrifugal compressors. This plant is going to be a maintenance nightmare, and if the costs of that are passed on to the ratepayers, they'll say quit running it with lignite, run it on natural gas. They won't be able to pay for the operating and maintenance costs. But just consider this simple fact. A combined cycle, natural gas combined cycle plant might require 30 people or so, I don't know, to run it. This plant has over 300 full-time employees to run as a gasification plant.
So how can you call this an unsuccessful experiment and just walk away from it?
Unfortunately, we're at that point where the money's already spent and tough decisions are going to have to be made, but I'll point back to the original decision, the rationale to build the plant in the first place. Just because you've spent all this money chasing something that's not going to be economically viable to run, there's certainly no reason to continue to throw good money after bad. And at some point, and I believe we're at that point, you have to cut your losses. Now that should have been the case for the company. I believe back in 2012 we had a golden opportunity to, quote, go to this dual fuel mode. In 2012, the PSC had to reconsider the approval of the Kemper County IGCC. The Supreme Court remanded it back. Instead of considering the economics, because we knew we were falling behind on construction, we knew a lot of things were going to increase costs. instead of making the decision then to run it as a dual fuel plant and maybe capping your costs at $1.5 billion, where you basically stop your construction on the gasification side of the plant and you just finish off the combined cycle and you run it as a combined cycle. 10 years from now, if natural gas prices went up, then Mississippi Power could have come back, finished the gasification side of the plant, and spent the money when they needed it. But what they've done is that the company has essentially made a $7 billion bet that's not going to pay off. Natural gas is going to stay low. The plant, look, I can't do the economics right here on my notebook, but I'm just going to guess rough numbers. The original economic justification to run this plant was that it had to be under $3.1 billion and natural gas had to go above $11 per million BTUs, okay? Well, we're not at $3.1 billion, we're at double that. So what does natural gas have to do now to justify running it on lignite? And combine that with the fact, once again, that was based on the operating and maintenance projections back from 2009, which were done by the same people who missed so badly the capital cost projections. I would venture to say that, yeah, we just need to cut our losses, and that plant will never operate as a viable gasification plant for electricity.
What's the lesson from all of this?
The lesson is for Southern Company, and let me say this about Southern Company. I'm coming across very critical of the company. The workers of Southern Company, of Mississippi Power, Alabama Power, Georgia Power, Gulf Power, are all great people. You know, I had a team of engineers. We were dedicated to our work, and we believed in Kemper. But decisions were made at the high level, at very high levels in the company, to basically blind themselves to the true cost, because if you saw the true cost and the true schedule, it would have made Kemper a non-starter. And so there's a lot of lessons. The lesson for Southern Company is don't ever blind yourself to what the true cost is going to be, because it can get away from you. I don't even think in their wildest dreams they thought it would be this bad. The lesson for the Public Service Commission is do not trust the regulated utility. And I can say this, I was in there, and this company has tried to basically ruin my life for doing the right thing. I was trying to protect the CEO when I called him, okay? Because I knew that there were criminal penalties for certifying the financials based on that 2014 COD. So I was trying to protect him, and the reward has been for them to try to destroy my career. The utility company, I can say Southern Company, is not a company that should be trusted on their financial projections. I bring in outside people to really look over any numbers on any capital projects to make sure that it's reasonable.
You said you believed in this in the beginning. Do you feel like you were tricked from the beginning into a project that didn't, based on the time frame and the financial constraints, that it couldn't be done?
Well, as an engineer that's designing it, you let other people do their jobs in terms of projecting when it can be done and how much it's going to cost. We focused on the technology. So later on, as I became a project manager, yeah, I can say I felt like I was tricked because as a project manager, you want to be successful. You want to meet your deadlines. You want to control your budget, your costs. And so when I took the job as project manager, I thought that's exactly what I was going to get to do, and that's what I would be rewarded for. So when I tried to do that and realized that stepping out of line like that and actually trying to control costs and meet your promises was not what they wanted me to do, yes, I was personally tricked when it came to being a manager inside that company. And there's a lot of people that are in the same boat, but unfortunately they have mortgages to pay and they can't speak up.
After a long time on administrative leave, you said they mercifully terminated you at that point. You're moving on to a new job. You live in Alabama. Why continue to pursue this? What's in this for you?
There's not a lot in it for me as a whistleblower. And like I said at the beginning of the interview, I hate that moniker, but it is what it is. I have a damaged career that needs to be made whole. I was an up-and-coming manager, and I wanted to one day lead the engineering and construction services division of Southern Company because I could see that I could really do the job well. But unfortunately, that was derailed by this entire series of incidents. So there's the one thing is making sure my family doesn't suffer for me having done the right thing, and I'm pursuing that through a complaint that I filed with the Department of Labor through OSHA in February of last year, and that takes a long time to see through, but we'll eventually get through that. But I guess furthermore, once my name basically was outed after the company publicly sued me, trying to force me to accept an almost $1 million settlement that I told them I didn't want, and I wouldn't disclose the amount or the terms of the settlement if they hadn't tried to sue me. The only reason I'm mentioning those types of things is because they did try to sue me. But once I became the victim of that type of corporate behavior, and I could see what was happening to the people in Mississippi, I felt a responsibility, a bit of empathy. I don't know. I feel like the people in Mississippi need somebody to stand up for them and tell them what exactly was happening inside that company, because nobody else seems to be willing or able to do it, and it's only fair. So what's in it for me? I want to feel good that the people in Mississippi aren't basically doomed to 40 years of poverty because of the bad decisions of some executives at a regulated utility.
Would you be willing to testify before the Public Service Commission if the company asked for another rate increase?
Not only would I be willing to testify, but I will crawl on over broken glass to go testify at that meeting. Once again, there's been too many times when only one side of the story has been heard, and that's been from the company. And my personal experience with the company tells me you can't believe anything that they say. And that goes all the way to my retaliation case, where they're calling me incompetent. They're saying that none of my concerns had any factual basis and were without merit. Well, I don't see how you can continue to say that when the schedule I've been vindicated on the schedule. People need to see that other side of the company. You cannot believe what they're telling you.
Do you think Mississippi Power should be given a rate increase for the lignite side of the plant?
I do not believe they should, and the reason is, after running the plant for just a few years, if they accept an additional $3 billion to run this as a dual fuel or a lignite plant, they'll realize it's too cost prohibitive. They will shut the lignite part of the plant down. They will run it for the next 40 years as a natural gas combined cycle, but they're going to be paying a whole lot of extra money for that $3 billion asset that's just sitting there rusting.
Can you talk a little bit about the documents that you saved, the conversations you recorded to help make your case, and how other people responded?
Yes, I can talk about that. When I realized that after going all the way up to the CEO and realizing that he was okay with things and that I was basically on my way out, I realized I needed to take steps to protect myself. So I did save my emails, all correspondence that would support my allegations of serious ethical issues, misconduct, potentially rising to the level of fraud, and I do believe fraud occurred. So yes, I saved all of my information that would protect me in terms of those allegations of fraud. In terms of the recordings that I made of my coworkers, of everything that's happened during this entire ordeal, I do feel badly about that. But I tried with my coworkers to get them to step forward with me, and with the culture inside the company being what it is, they would tell me, look, I've got a mortgage, look, I need health insurance. They basically couldn't go through what I'm going through now, which is I've been unemployed for 6 months, but hopefully start tomorrow at my first post-Southern Company job. But when I realized that the company could basically paint me as a lunatic, somebody who was out there who I was the only person that thought this way, I knew otherwise. I had to make sure to protect myself by secretly recording my coworkers and friends, although I don't think they would call me their friends now. It was not received well at all by half of the folks, and I made it a point to call them and let them know when the New York Times article was about to run that I had taped them, and I would say at least half of them reacted to that violently. They were not happy, and I don't blame them. But some of them showed support. So, but yes, that was done to protect myself and my family.
Many of those conversations, those coworkers corroborated what you have alleged, and those people weren't necessarily identified. So it turned out to be, at least in terms of helping with your with your claims, it was a positive.
It is a positive, and I had to consider the balance of the harms for my coworkers. Quite frankly, I don't think the New York Times carries an article if it's just he said, Brett Wingo says this, Southern Company says that. I don't think you have a story. I think the recordings paint a much broader picture. I think they were the key to getting the exposure that we needed. And I will say this in my defense, I did consider potential implications to these former coworkers' employment status, promotability. But the thing is, they didn't know they were being recorded. They didn't out the company. They were just speaking their minds, and the law protects them as well from any type of retaliation. So I did consider the fact that they would be protected by the law before I agreed to release these tapes.
Former project manager for the Kemper County Power Plant, Brett Wingo, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.